Now this is old.
So from everybody here, let's hear it again for everybody out there. Session of his one-party parliament, he announced that he had personally invented the bath plug. You stick this in the hole in the bath, he said, and the water stops there instead of running out and making the sand sticky. Yes, I thought you'd like that, he told his fascinated audience. Wait till those cocky Western bastards hear about this. British Miners' Union leader Arthur Scargill was asked by everyone, including the few remaining British miners, what had happened to the money which had been sent from all over the world so the miners' strike could be prolonged well past the point of disaster. Finally, the truth began to emerge. Scargill, it was said, had blown the money on a 20-foot Russian garden gnome to decorate the grounds of his secret luxury miner's cottage, done striking. For the British Labour Party, power came that much closer when Glenda Jackson was selected as prospective MP for Hampstead. Mr. Neil Kinnock, in a false beard, personally delivered the news.
This is the Lord's doing. It is marvellous in our eyes.
Madonna was the Margaret Thatcher of the pop world. She went on, and you really didn't want to listen. But Madonna had figured this out and thrown in a few hand movements. She called it voguing. Soon everyone was doing it. Douglas Hurd, master of languages and an international Thatcherite, now demonstrated that he was fully at home in French.
Nous n'avons pas à vous reprocher d'éprouver le besoin d'une vision lumineuse de l'avenir.
Unfortunately, Mr. Hurd was in Germany at the time. Down in Iraq, Saddam Hussein, philosopher, philanthropist and revolutionary bath plug designer, proved that his interest in plumbing was no flash in the pan. Saddam had personally invented a new sewage system for Iraq that came out in Kuwait. Saddam then went on television to tell the waiting Iraqi millions that plumbing was even more difficult than it looked. The apprentice plumber, he said, must be careful not to catch his thumb. It is very easy to catch the thumb between the spigot and the flange. If you do, he concluded, you might get angry and do something stupid, such as starting World War III. The Middle Eastern beauty contest Miss Tea Towel 1990 was won by exotic PLO lovely Yasmin Arafat. Yasmin's prize was a tour of the Vatican and a chance to meet the Pope, with whom she exchanged gifts. Always generous with her favors, Yasmin presented the Pope with a framed photograph of the Tripoli Girls High School netball team, of which she had been captain when it attacked Israel in 1973. Moved, His Holiness gave Yasmin a shaving kit from the Alitalia business class handout bag. And now, it's time for our first quiz question. One of these men has a remote chance of becoming Prime Minister of Great Britain, and the other was born in Wales. Which is which? American billionaire Donald Trump's booming career now reached another zenith. He was the man who had everything. Owner of one of the tallest wives in New York, he had rebuilt her several times and installed luxury entertainment areas on the mezzanine and the 40th floor. Property experts were asking how could he top that. He topped it by acquiring a controlling interest in Marla Maples, a modern structure with low running costs, considerable potential for redevelopment, and a constant cool air supply from the vacant top story. But Marla Maples proved to the world that although she loved Donald with a deathless passion, her feelings towards Ivana were without malice.
I think she's an absolutely beautiful woman. I think she was before surgery.
On the British political scene, something extraordinary had happened. Labour were ahead in the polls. Mr. Kinnock's colleagues knew the party could stay in the lead as long as they stopped him giving a speech. But he jumped out of the armoured car, and after removing the straitjacket and the gag, he headed for Westminster on foot. Before he even got there, Labour were behind again. The world of sport was rocked to its Reeboks when one of its superstars announced his retirement. He was snooker genius Alex Hurricane Higgins. Higgins bowed out with a speech that showed he had learned what that fatal 8th pint before breakfast can do to a man, and had drunk the 9th to get over it.
So I would like to announce my retirement from professional snooker. But I'm not playing snooker anymore because this game is the most correct game in the world.
As Alex was carried away to the waiting skip, sports fans were disconsolate.
Those of us who knew him will remember him for the qualities that made him such a successful leader of men and such a good friend.
As the weather got warmer, the annual marching season began. Britain's Rottweiler owners marched to protest against the declining supply of small children. For obscure Italian classical composer Antonio Vivaldi, April was a big month. He finally broke through when British musician Nigel Kennedy not only recorded the Four Seasons, but also analysed the piece with stunning intellectual precision.
The second movement I see as a kind of warning of the nuclear explosion, the first bad one, what's going to happen, and it's a bit kind of represents mushrooms and stuff, and like maybe, you know, mushrooms as taken as inspirational substances also. I mean, it could be, it's all of that stuff in one, kind of premature, like picture of the nuclear bomb exploding, and like also kind of a little bit, you know, hazy and messed about in the head.
Even as he spoke, the British public had stormed the record stores to drown out the sound of Nigel talking by listening to the sound of Nigel playing. President Dan Quayle arrived in Britain to visit Mrs. Thatcher at her country residence, Chequers. At Chequers, Mrs. Thatcher pointed out to him some subtle aspects of British rural life. This is a house, she explained. That thing over there is a tree. Who's that guy up the tree? Asked Mr. Quayle. That's my husband Dennis, said Mrs. Thatcher. Despite Mrs. Thatcher's invincibility, Michael Heseltine still cherished dreams of the leadership. At his vast secret training camp, He personally built a replica of number 10 Downing Street's front door so he could practice going in and out of it. Meanwhile, in the Soviet Union, Gorbachev's dynamism had caught the imagination of the world. Britain's own Princess Anne was looking for a new man in her life, and there could be only one choice. Despite the difference in their backgrounds, the attraction was immediate when, in front of the world's press, they met secretly in Moscow. It's always nice to meet another horse lover, he told her. He himself had been eating it all his life. Princess Anne was then presented with the Soviet horse biscuit made out of pig iron. On top of that, from the state ceremonial plastic bag was produced a KGB Jackboots No. 7 makeup compact containing 2 spare hair pieces, donated to the Soviet people by British hero of Labour, Arthur Scargill. The Green Party was now a force in British politics. It drew lots of media attention at its annual conference. Prince Charles turned up incognito. Germany, and suspicions that Chancellor Kohl was an unfeeling, globally ambitious technocrat were set at rest by the discovery that he had a secret girlfriend, a humble secretary called Alice von Schneckenheim von der Heilbrunner Hildebrand Pfaffenpfeffer. When Kohl visited Washington, President Bush said he had heard the Chancellor had a lady friend called Alice von Schneckenheim von der Heilbrunner Hildebrand Pfaffenpfeffer, but the President said the world would like to know what the Chancellor called Miss Alice von Schneckenheim von der Heilbrunner Hildebrand Pfaffenpfeffer for short.
Alice.
Romance was in the air for Nelson Mandela, who had taken up with the haunting Palestinian beauty Yasmin Arafat. They made a lovely couple. Luciano Pavarotti, the Italian singing goalkeeper, was invited to visit Moscow. In Red Square, he showed the Russian press how he planned to keep goal for Italy in the forthcoming World Cup. That night, he sang for the Gorbachevs at the Bolshoi. Raisa, as usual, was lost in the pages of her Harrods catalogue. But then the performance began. Luciano sang an aria from the famous Russian opera Boris Yeltsin. The aria was the hauntingly lovely "Your Tiny Potato is Frozen." The evening was a triumph, and Luciano was showered with Russia's highest floral tributes, consisting of many varieties of flowering potato, including the very rare Siberian spud orchid. As Archbishop of Canterbury, Dr. Runce's retirement grew closer, the Archbishop warned applicants for his job about the difficulties it entailed. These included wearing a very silly hat, which tended to lose its jewels even in a moderate wind, wearing the traditional sanctified duvet cover in similar condition, and, of course, being followed about by 2 very weird old men with sticks.